Bun găsit la emisiunea Știință și Cunoaștere. Data trecută am difuzat prima parte a unui interviu recent realizat prin camera web cu profesorul de biologie Bruce Lipton. Înainte de a viziona interviul, mi-aș permite însă o scurtă paranteză pentru a vă povesti câteva evenimente din perioada iulie-august 2015. Surpriza a fost că la sfârșitul lunii iulie am avut o întâlnire preliminară pe Skype cu profesorul de neurologie Guimrac Aliev din Texas, care mi-a promis un interviu de 4 ore, dar care momentan e amânat, însă am înregistrat aproximativ o jumătate de oră în condiții tehnice relativ slabe. Am făcut un fel de schimb de informații legate de proprietățile melaninei, respectiv cele ale mitocondriilor, și ideile se intersectau undeva pe drum. Domnia sa însă a menționat câteva lucruri legate de cercetare, sănătate, medicamente, tratamente, terapii și multe altele, pe care le vom reactualiza cu ocazia interviului întreg de 4 ore pe care mi l-a promis. Revenind însă la ceea ce urmează să vedem în minutele următoare, am inclus o secvență de 1 minut cu profesorul Aliev pentru a aduce în discuție un subiect foarte controversat, și anume medicina și medicamentele numite și alopate. Dar așa cum am procedat și în emisiunea de data trecută, atunci când abordăm teme legate de sănătate și medicină, câteva prevederi legale ne obligă să precizăm faptul că această emisiune nu conține sfaturi medicale și nu poate fi folosită pentru diagnoza sau tratamentul unor afecțiuni. Considerăm că este necesar să fie consultați experți în domeniu care pot oferi sfaturile necesare. Producătorul și colaboratorii nu își asumă responsabilitatea aplicării practice a ideilor prezentate de către persoane neavizate sau insuficient pregătite care vizionează această emisiune. Emisiunea Știință și Cunoaștere prezintă informații generale pentru înțelegerea cât mai completă a stării de sănătate și ridicarea nivelului de calitate a vieții. Materialele și sfaturile furnizate trebuie apreciate ca simple informații și nu ca analize și sfaturi medicale. În toate cazurile, vă sfătuim să consultați medicul de familie dacă vă îngrijorează starea dumneavoastră de sănătate. Informațiile oferite sunt de natură exclusiv educațională și informativă și nu pot fi asimilate în nicio situație unor consultații sau analize medicale de specialitate. Informația prezentată nu trebuie folosită ca alternativă a consultului medical realizat de un medic specialist. Producătorul și colaboratorii nu pot fi considerați răspunzători pentru niciun prejudiciu, indiferent de modul în care veți utiliza informația prezentată. În prima parte vom vorbi despre telomeri și vom explica și ilustra cu ajutorul unei animații computerizate cum se creează acele molecule speciale numite telomeri și ce rol au ele la replicarea ADN-ului. Pe urmă vom vorbi despre medicamente, efectul placebo, dar și acolo am încercat să previn apariția unei opinii care ne facă să credem că absolut toate medicamentele sunt toxice sau inutile. Nu este așa. Însă nu putem nega faptul că există anumite interese. Nu putem nega faptul că reviste de prestigiu chiar publică declarații legate de faptul că medicamentele reprezintă a 3-a cauză majoră de deces în Statele Unite. Însă fără ele ar putea fi cu mult mai rău. Ființa umană este sensibilă la influențele din mediu, numite și epigenetice, cât și la variabilitatea emoțională. Și uneori nu putem face față tuturor factorilor perturbatori care intervin în viața noastră și ne aduc suferințe. Așa că nimic din ceea ce discutăm la modul teoretic în aceste emisiuni nu poate fi considerat un adevăr absolut și imbatabil. Dar există situații diverse. Unii dintre noi nu au nevoie de medicamente. Alții au nevoie de ele doar ocazional. Iar alții sunt dependenți parțial sau total de medicamente. Aceasta este o realitate pe care nici eu, nici Bruce Lipton nu o putem schimba și cu aceste precizări vă invit acum să vedem partea a doua a interviului cu profesorul Bruce Lipton, înregistrat în luna august 2015. Welcome back to our part 2 interview. There is a myth regarding the fact that we only use 10% of our brain. Please let us know your opinion about after viewing the next clip, which is entitled Using 100% of Your Brain, and continue the discussion later.
Yes. Hi, dear friends, cultural creatives, and imaginal selves everywhere. Bruce back. In this month's newsletter, I really want to focus on something called an urban myth. And this particular urban myth is the belief that we only operate off of 10% of our brain. So we've all heard that, yes, we're only using 10% of our brain, and boy, if we could use all the rest of it, we'd be super smart. But hey, that's all we use. Firstly, where did that number come from, 10%? A long time ago, when putting the body together through an understanding of histology and the cells that make up organs, a study of the brain revealed one very important fact, and that is only 10% of the brain was made up of neurons. 90% of the cells in the brain were not neurons, but they were called supporting or connective tissue and given the name glial cells. Well, what's really interesting about that is in the neuron principle, the neuron doctrine, it was believed that the neurons were the functional cells of the brain and the glial cells were more or less just support. Well, then by definition, right away, it says then you're only using 10% of your brain because that's all that the neurons comprise in the brain, 10%. For a long time, the glial cells, again, were thought to be just like connective tissue support physically and nutritionally the neurons. But over the last number of decades, what we started to find is this: there was a misunderstanding about glial cells. That glial cells are a lot more important in neural function than just physical support. Glial cells can inhibit or activate neurons. Glial cells connect to neurons. Glial cells can control the activity of neurons. So all of a sudden, these glial cells, which were looked at as just passive cells in the brain, turn out to be actually quite functional in integrating the nature of how the brain works. In a way of looking at it, in a simple analogy, consider that the neurons are nouns in a sentence, and that the glial cells are the verbs and the adjectives and the adverbs, the modifiers of all the nouns. So the glial cells create a fulfillment of a picture. So neurons are like a stick figure, and when you add the glial cells, you fill out the nature of the whole human. So glial cells become a very functional, integrated part of all neuronal activity. So the concept of the neuron doctrine that said only neurons are involved with functioning in the nervous system, it turns out the glial cells are as well. So now we're not dealing with 10% of the brain, we're dealing with 100% of the brain. Yes, you have access to 100% of your brain all of the time. But does that mean that we actually use the whole brain all of the time? And the answer is no. Because what we start to find out is when we start to live in patterns and in habits, that what happens is we just activate certain neuronal pathways that are habitual pathways. And as a result, these are the pathways that have preference in our everyday life. But if you can engage whole brain activity, you can enhance your consciousness and your awareness and your ability to control your life. So basically it says that we can become whole brain when we start to think holistically instead of just playing recurrent programs that play over and over again and activate the same pathways. So the relevance is that once we start to engage in whole brain activity, we enhance our ability as humans on this planet. And now we're beginning to find out there are many different ways to engage and activate the whole brain. Some of them involve simple exercises such as something called brain gym. And brain gym is a very interesting exercise of the body and the nervous system integration in this way. My right hand is controlled by my left hemisphere. My left hand is controlled by my right hemisphere. But here's an interesting story. If my right hand, controlled by my left hemisphere, crosses the midline, then it simultaneously gets picked up by the other hemisphere because now it's in that territory as well. So when you cross your arms and when you cross your legs, what you're doing is causing the right and the left hemispheres to work together in harmony. When we are activating brain synchronization, where right and left hemispheres are engaged together simultaneously, it activates something like superlearning. With both hemispheres working together, we have much more superior characteristics of neural function. However, after age 7 and 8, we start to express what is called brain dominance, meaning during the day, we don't have synchronization of both hemispheres. During the day, it's like a wave form. Sometimes we're more in the left hemisphere, sometimes we're more in the right, then it comes back to the left and back to the right, so that we're cycling through one hemisphere at a time. This is called brain dominance, where one hemisphere is dominant over the other hemisphere. Well, the relevance about that is integrating our lives is very difficult in brain dominance for a simple reason. As been suggested, our left hemisphere is based on logic and details. Our right hemisphere is actually associated with emotions and wholeness. And this becomes very important because if you're only looking with your left hemisphere, then all the logic things make sense, but there's no emotional component to it. And reverse, if you're in the right hemisphere, you get emotionally tied up, but the logic drops out. Well, this happens to us ever since the time we were 8 through our adult life. If you can get both hemispheres to be in sync, hemisync, then you're engaging logic and emotions at the same time. That opens up a window for super learning opportunities where you can download information very, very quickly and very fast, but it also opens up a whole wide range of thinking that includes an emotional component as well as an intellectual component, which is necessary to fulfill a whole picture. So if you're operating from brain dominance, you're actually shutting off one component of your nervous system at that time. So if you do an exercise like brain gym where you're involved with crossing your arms and your legs, when you do that, you start to integrate both. Very interestingly, when we have hemisync, we're much more calm, collected, and able to really express neurological functions that are very fully supporting of ourselves. And this is why it's very interesting when you go home and relax at night, sometimes you find yourself with your ankles crossed over each other just sitting in your chair. Without even knowing what you're doing, by crossing your ankles, you're actually engaging a whole brain process. So if you're stressed, for example, during the day, or you just want to relax when you go home at night, crossing your arms and legs actually engages both hemispheres, which calms the system down, but engages a whole brain process. So you become much more effective in your relaxed state. So if you're having a tough moment during the day, just take a moment and cross your arms and legs. Hold them together and just wait for about 3 or 4 minutes and you'll start to feel a calmness overcome. And in this calmness, your neurological functions will be totally enhanced. When we start to operate from patterns that are replayed every day, we start to express very specific pathways that are reused over and over and over again. And as a result, we actually shut down a large amount of functioning of the brain and just go through the habit, the patterns that replay themselves over and over again. So basically, what you really have to understand is this: we can use 100% of the brain, but if we play the same patterns over and over again, we don't need to use 100% of the brain. So, simple point, I'd just like to suggest that once you start to recognize that you can have hemisync, where you can get right and left hemispheres to engage together and stay conscious, you are using 100% of your brain activity. And when you do that, you'll also find that your life is easier, more harmonious, and healthier. Because when you're using your full nervous system, it will support your life and enhance your growth. And this becomes important. So don't get stuck that I'm only using 10% of my brain. That story is false. You can use 100%, and it's available to us. And basically all you have to understand is this: stay conscious, stay mindful, and stop playing the same patterns over and over again, because that opens up an opportunity to create new behavior when you stop playing the programs.
Welcome back, and please let's continue the idea.
Well, that will make it shorter, won't it? That will give us more free time. But you know, it was a belief system based on an incorrect belief. Just simple. Because the belief system was that neurons are the functional nerve cell in the brain. So neurons relate to brain function. And I go, yeah, and what percent of the brain is neurons? 10%. I go, oh, then 90% of the brain doesn't have neurons. I go, no. And so they say, you're only using 10% of your brain. But it turns out that other 90% that we thought was not doing something now is one of the most important controls in the brain. So we're using 10% neurons and 90% called glial cells, and 100% is the total. That's how much we work with. But in the old days, only neurons were the nerve cell. But then I said, yeah, but that's only 10%. That's where the belief came from, because we didn't know that the other 90%, the glial cells, are very important in controlling nerve function.
Can you tell us now about the role of telomeres in our body and what are they?
Okay. When you copy a DNA, let's say my arm is DNA. A protein goes on top of the DNA and moves down the DNA. And it leaves behind a copy. So as I move down, I'm copying the DNA. So my arm, I'm now making a new copy with this protein. But watch what happens when the protein gets to the end. It gets to the end, okay? And I say, well, it copied all of this, but it can't copy the part it's sitting on. It's sitting on it. Can't copy it because the next move pops off. So it says, when I copy the DNA, when the protein gets to the end of the DNA, it can't copy the last piece because it drops off. So it says this piece of DNA, the part that the protein was sitting on, the last piece cannot be copied. So I duplicate all of the DNA up to here, but I don't duplicate this. Yeah, but then the next time I copy the other DNA, when it gets to the end, it doesn't copy the end of that one either. So every time you copy the DNA, you lose a little piece of the DNA because that's where the copy device is sitting on it and can't copy it. So every time your cell divides, you lose a little piece of DNA. So nature says, wait, I'm going to put extra piece of DNA on the end. It's not for the gene, it's just an extra piece so that the copy device will, when it copies, I lose a little piece, but it's not the gene. I just lose a little piece of extra. The extra is called telomere. It doesn't make the gene program. It's just an extra little platform so that as the copy device moves and it gets to the end of the platform, it doesn't copy this part. So the new copy is short. This is short this much. So I say, well, then the telomeres allow the DNA to be copied without interfering with the gene because it's an extra piece. I go, yeah, but then here's the problem. If your cells divide a lot and they keep losing a piece of the telomere and losing a piece and losing a piece, there's a point where you run out of telomere. Now the next copy of the DNA, when it gets to the end, it's still on the gene. And if I don't copy this piece of the gene is defective. So it says this. Every day when a cell divides, it copies the DNA. Every day when the DNA is copied, it loses a little piece of the end. And the end is called telomeres. It's not the gene. The gene begins over here. This is just the end. So I can lose a piece, I can lose a piece, I can lose. I got no problem because it's not part of the gene. But when you get to a certain part, you cut off all the telomeres, and next time you copy the DNA, you're going to lose the piece of the gene. And now it's not going to work. This is called aging. It says every time you copy the cell, you lose a piece of DNA. And I said, how many times can you copy it before you run out of the telomeres? In a laboratory experiment, in a tissue culture, they said about 60 times. If the cell divides 60 times, it's going to lose 60 little pieces, and by 60 times, the telomere is gone. And I say the next cell division, now you're going to mess up the gene program. That's called aging. So we had a belief that the telomeres protect the gene because every time you copy it, you just lose a piece of this and a piece until the telomere is gone. And then you begin to age sick because the genes are messed up. And that's what they say, oh, that's why we get old and fall apart and we die. But now we have a new understanding. And the new understanding is this. We can add new telomeres. We can make them grow. And if we can make them grow, then we don't run out of telomere. So if you don't run out of telomere, what does that mean? It says, well, then you stop aging. Because aging is when you lose the telomeres and then you start cutting off piece of the gene. But if I can make new telomeres, then I don't have to age. I say, and why is this relevant? Because of this. Lifestyle, happiness, stress, these things affect the telomere. And if you're under a lot of stress, you don't replace it, and therefore you die younger. If you're happy and a healthy individual, you live longer because you make the telomeres last longer. So the length of the telomere is directly connected to the length of your life and your health. Short telomeres, you're getting ready to get sick and die. Long telomeres, you got a big life ahead of you. And I say you can extend your life by supporting the extension of the telomeres. Are you still there?
I'm still here, but where do we get those supplemental parts from?
There's an enzyme that increases the length of the telomeres. It's called telomerase. telomerase, that's the name of it. It's an enzyme. When active, the enzyme increases the length of the telomere, which extends your life and extends your health. And I say, so what activates the enzyme, or what prevents the enzyme from working? Well, the first thing we know is this: stress, trauma, lack of love, these prevent the enzyme from working. So a person's life filled with stress and trauma and no love is going to have a shorter life, and they're going to get sicker faster. In contrast, people who are healthy, people who are happy. Happy is the chemistry of the body. When you feel happy, it's because chemistry is making you happy. Well, that chemistry increases your health. So happy people have the enzyme work, and they stay alive longer and healthier because they're extending the telomeres. And then here's another thing. People who are what we call caregivers. A caregiver is a person who takes care of somebody else. Like if you have a parent and they're sick and you have to take care of them, you're a caregiver. Guess what? Caregivers are very important of life. So when you're a caregiver, the brain activates the telomeres to go longer. Why? Because you have to stay healthier longer to take care of the other person. So caregivers live longer and healthier than other people who are not caregivers. And all of a sudden you see it's the style of your life, the character of your life, what you're doing, how you feel about life. These are the things that control the telomere enzyme. When the enzyme stops working, aging and illness is the net result over a period of time. But if you can activate the enzyme, you can stay young longer and stay healthier longer. Why? Because the cells can divide more and more and more, so you don't run out of stem cells. Aging is the relation of the telomere. That's an exact thing. The longer your telomere is, the more the cells can divide and be healthy. But when the telomeres get too short, then the division of the cell leads to broken cells and sickness and health, ill health. And so why is it important? Because when you take care of yourself, when you learn to be happy, which is, again, a feeling which is from chemistry, the body will make more telomeres and keep you younger and healthier than those people who are stressed.
I have a very important issue which must be addressed to the public. But first, please let's hear what these neurologists have to say about pharmaceutical drugs and why many of them are not very working. I interviewed him earlier this year. It's a pre-recorded interview, but very interesting. Please let's hear first just a few seconds from the recording I made at that time.
Add you one thing, maybe think about, maybe if you want, you can add on our interview. So question is that 90 or 95% of medication, what we prescribe today, is wrong or harmful, or nothing or harmful. 95%. But you can say, why we sell? Why? It's money. Just one example, in United States of America, last year's, no, 2013, profit selling from insulin and CFR, you know, diabetes type 1, type 2 medication. Do you know how much profit they made? $73 billion 1 year only in United States. So, I was on meeting, now even they don't take any in vivo or in vitro test. They now make a mathematical modeling that's showing this will be non-toxic. Can you imagine? So if we get worse and worse and worse and worse in this situation. So the future medicine, I don't believe any medicine was very, you know, to sell in pharmacy. But its question is that is too much politics, too much, you know, to money and money power. And people like me or you, we are dangerous for them. Because, yeah, we show that.
Absolutely. 100%. And the fact is this, let's change an idea. When people talk about the pharmaceutical industry, they have a belief that, oh, the pharmaceutical industry is there to help you. I'm going to make drugs to help you. And I go, that's not what the pharmaceutical industry is a corporation. It makes money for the shareholders. So when it sells drugs, it has to make a profit and then share that money with the people who invested in the company. So the question is this, is the drug company working for you as a patient, or is the drug company working for the money? And the answer is, they don't care about you, they care about the money. So here's a simple fact, and I know this to be true because I talk to executives of the drug company a lot. Number one, they actually have some very effective drugs that could help us, but they don't sell them. You say, why not? Because if you buy the drug once, then you don't need me anymore. So I give you a drug that's not so good, but you need to buy it forever, like statins. How long is a statin prescription? How long are you going to live? In other words, I hook you into buy these chemicals for the rest of your life. And what do we know about statins? They don't help less than 3%. If I take 100 people and put them on statins, less than 3 of them will have any benefit. What does that mean? 97 people out of 100 have no benefit. That's a very large number. And they're selling statins all over the world. And here's the other problem. Only 3% of the people may get a benefit. But guess what? The side effects of statin affect up to 25% of the people. So I say, you're helping 3 people and you're getting 25 people sick from side effects. And you say, well, I wouldn't sell that drug because it's not really helping. And they go, it doesn't make a difference how much money they're going to make. They don't care if they help you or not. As long as you believe it and you buy the drug, they don't care if it's hurting you. And here's the other one thing about pharmaceutical company. When they test a drug and the side effect is death, you think, oh, don't make that drug. It can kill people. No, here's what the pharmaceutical company does. They calculate how many people are going to die, and they calculate how much money they're going to make selling the drug. And if they can make more money than the lawsuits from those that die, they make a profit. So what's the point? When they do the calculation, if they figure they can make more money and ignore the lawsuits, pay for them because they'll still make more money, they'll market a drug that they know kills people. Why? They don't care about killing the people. They care about how much money they were going to make. And if you can make money and still kill people and pay for it and still make a profit, then you sell the drug. And I go, then the drug companies are not there for your health. And I go, absolutely not. The drug companies are there for the profit. And we buy into the belief. And now we find that over in the U.S. alone, over 300 to 400,000 people die every year from taking prescription drugs. That's the health industry. Even the health industry in the Journal of the American Medical Association, that's the Journal of the American Medical Association. What did they write? They wrote, medicine is the 3rd leading cause of death in the United States. And it's actually, that was conservative numbers because when people actually did the real numbers, medicine was essentially the leading cause of death. And you go, wait a minute, isn't medicine supposed to help you? And I go, no, medicine's making a profit. If you die, I don't care, as long as we made a profit. And that's why in the United States, 2/3, 60-some percent of bankruptcies where people lose all of their money and their house and everything is because of health bills. 2/3 of all the people that have to sell their house and sell all their possessions to get medical treatment. Why? Because medical treatment is for profit. It's for money. And the most important point is you could heal yourself, except not when you believe that you must buy the drug. And that's why they advertise drugs and they push the drugs and they do all that. They're just as bad as illegal drug dealers. They're there to make money. They don't care what happens to you as long as you buy the drug. And if you believe they're your friend, that's where we have a problem.
Yes, but there is something which makes them so profitable. It is simply because we need to buy from them. Many people having all sorts of health problems, seeing our program, are wondering if there is a way out. But on the other hand, if I present my own example, they say, oh, well, I can't do what you did. Please tell us something easier and fast. And I don't have anything like this, easier and fast.
No, because look, you didn't get sick easy and fast. It took years for you to create a life that makes you sick, and you want to change it like turn the switch? I go, no. If it took time for you to get sick, it takes time for you to get well. And you have to know that. And I say, did the drugs do it? And I'll give you an example. One of the biggest selling drugs on the planet today is something like Prozac. I say, oh, Prozac, that's for the nervous system and depression and all that kind of stuff. I say, guess what? In a laboratory test, which the drug companies did not give to the public, there were scientists that had to go to the government and said, we want the results of the test. The pharmaceutical company didn't tell us the result. What did they find out? Here's the truth. Paxil, which is billions of dollars sold every day, in a laboratory test is no better than a sugar pill. It's the same as a placebo. And I say, it doesn't do it. It doesn't do it. It's just the belief in the drug that causes it to work. The drug itself in a laboratory experiment doesn't work. But people believe in it. They tell each other, oh, I took the Paxil, I took the Prozac, I feel so much better, and therefore you should take it. And I go, it's a sugar pill. If you believe it, it will work. But the fact was, billions of dollars for a drug that has more side effects than it has benefits. That's, again, another drug. And I go, billions of dollars, but if you believe it. So I say, what is it? It's called placebo effect. And I say, what's placebo effect? And we know placebo effect is, I give you a drug, tell you this is going to heal you, you believe it, you take the drug, you get better, and you say, the drug healed me. And then I say, it was just a sugar pill, it wasn't real. Then I say, then what healed you? I believed I was going to get healed. It was the belief that healed you. Placebo is belief, not reality. And so most of the pharmaceutical drugs are basically placebo because we believe they're going to help us. Yet, even though we believe it, they're still causing 300,000-400,000 people to die every year because the drugs are toxic.
Yes, but we cannot make such an absolute statement because our viewers will believe that everything that medical science had achieved until now is completely useless, wrong, placebo, or harmful, and they are not all in these categories. Many common pharmaceutical drugs are not harmful if you are not under uninterrupted treatment. In some easy illnesses, they might have a quicker effect than plants. I don't think a common aspirin or some antibiotics could be considered harmful or useless if you don't use them, but only if it's really needed.
No, okay, so let's clear it up. We take and say, this is the whole drug market, this much. And I say, how much is placebo? Most of it's placebo. I say, how much is real? A small amount. I say, well, why is that relevant? Because as just you said, for some things, there are a few things where the drugs really work. And in fact, most of the things where the drugs work, they're actually natural drugs like aspirin or drugs like antibiotics that come from nature. They didn't make those, nature made those. They just put them in a capsule. But when they start synthesizing all that chemistry and creating brand new drugs, most of that is not very effective. And yet there is some. So that's why I say, well, don't throw out the entire pharmaceutical industry, but if you start to be very careful and read the data and see which are the things that are effective and which ones are for mind only. This is like, look, 1/3 of all the people that take what are called SSRI drugs, like Prozac, Paxil, these are those kind of drugs, 1/3 of those people get the benefit. And I go, you know what's interesting? 1/3 is the number for the placebo effect. No matter what laboratory tests they do in a pharmaceutical company, 1/3 of the people that take the drug or the placebo drug get the same effect. So did I say Prozac really helped people? I go, it helped them the same level as a placebo helped them. It didn't help them anymore.
Okay, but even so, the placebo effect is useful. And if those pharmaceutical drugs are having only this kind of effect, I see no reason why we shouldn't use if there are some rare life situations when we really need to speed up a healing process. And I believe all our viewers should read the labels before buying.
And so, yes, you have to be very careful and very precise. You have to understand the nature of which of the drugs have a real effect and which of the drugs don't have an effect. And I can tell you right now, the two biggest selling drugs in this world have no effect, and that is statins and SSRI drugs like Prozac. Those are sold basically because it's people's belief system at most, and in most cases, they don't even work. Statins, as I said, don't even work for 97 out of 100 people. They don't even work.
We created the cholesterol myth.
Yes, it's a myth. It's a total myth.
Because on the heart diseases, it's not the cholesterol which counts, but the triglycerides. No? But when those values are too high.
Let me tell you what it is. Because, Christian, I worked on atherosclerosis. That's the plaques that build up in the arteries and cause the closing down, the plaque, where they call it. People say cholesterol is the problem. I say, why did they believe that? And the answer is this. When you do a biopsy, a tissue, and you look at where the arteries are blocked, and I say, oh, that's a plaque. That's the buildup of the surface of the arteries blocking the flow. And they say, look, every time where we find a plaque, the cells are filled with cholesterol. They're filled with cholesterol. So they say, look, everywhere there's a plaque, there's cholesterol. And they said, cholesterol is the common thing, so cholesterol is causing the plaque. I was in a research lab where we work with that, okay? Now, how much cholesterol can cause a disease? Now, listen to this. We injected so much cholesterol into the rats that we were studying for atherosclerosis. We put so much cholesterol into their blood. When you took a sample of blood, it was milky white. The white it was so much cholesterol, the red was covered up by the white from the cholesterol. Now, here's what happened. If we gave them an antihistamine, a tablet like from the drugstore, antihistamine, no matter how much cholesterol we put in, they never got atherosclerosis. The antihistamine stopped the atherosclerosis. I said, yes, what did it do? Prevent the cholesterol from going in? I go, no. What happens is this. It's stress causes the plaque, and when the cells get sick, listen to this. After the cells get sick, that's when the cholesterol shows up. In other words, the cholesterol in a healthy cell doesn't show up like that. Only after it's sick. So when you were looking at the cholesterol in the cell, that didn't cause the plaque. That ended up at the plaque because that's a result of the plaque. So what causes the plaque? Stress. And all of a sudden you realize it's not the cholesterol, it's the stress. Now, cholesterol can make the system worse when you're in stress. But if you want to stop the cardiovascular disease, you don't try and regulate the cholesterol. You have to regulate the stress. That's where the cause comes from. And so we have been looking at the wrong thing. We've been saying cholesterol caused it because look at all the cholesterol in the damaged tissue. I go, no. The cholesterol only came after the damage occurred. It didn't cause the damage. So all of a sudden I said, well, if you want to deal with cardiovascular disease, you have to deal with what causes the damage, not the cholesterol. That shows up later. And I said, what causes it? Now we know. Stress, erratic pressure. Sometimes the pressure is high. Sometimes the pressure is low. That's what stress causes. Well, the blood vessels try to adjust to the pressure, but it's going up and down, up and down. And that's when it creates these plaques of cells because it doesn't know how to deal with the up and down stress. So if you stop the stress, the plaque goes away.
Yes, but there are two kinds of cholesterol, and they are called HDL and LDL, or kind of good and bad cholesterol.
It's only afterward you say, which form of cholesterol is in plaques on the blood vessel wall? And you find, it's the LDL version is the main one. So you say, well, then LDL cholesterol is the problem. I go, no, it still only showed up after the damage. LDL, HDL, that did not cause it. It showed up after. So you want to know what the cause is? Well, we already talked about the cause is stress. And that's why there's so much more of it and so many more heart attacks and all that. Those are the people under stress. And you say, well, if you eliminate the stress, you eliminate the problem. I go, absolutely. And all of a sudden it says, do I need to regulate cholesterol? I go, no. Cholesterol's not the problem. Cholesterol shows up after the problem. So we have to rethink. And that's why all these statin drugs, which are designed to control the cholesterol, they only affect about 3% of the people. And those are the people that are the very sickest, almost about to die people. 97% of the people, you can do all the cholesterol adjustment you want. It doesn't change anything. So all of a sudden it says, again, you bought a story, and the story sells the drugs. Is it true? No. Are they selling drugs? Yes. Is the pharmaceutical company making money? Much money. Do they want to stop selling the drug? And the answer is no. And the simple reason is why? Because the drug is making them a lot of money, even if it's not healing anybody. Okay? So the idea is the pharmaceutical company your friend? Are they there to help you? And the answer is no. Pharmaceutical company's there to make money, so they'll sell you cholesterol drugs even if they know the cholesterol drug is not helping at all. Okay?
Okay, yes.
So don't buy the story. Don't buy the story. It's a story.
Dear Dr. Bruce Lipton, I thank you so much for this amazing new interview, and I hope to meet you again next year in 2016.
I would love to do that. And before I go again, I want to thank you. I want to thank your audience, too. Your audience are very special people that are looking for different answers, a better way of life, how to live healthier and happier like you have learned. So I want to congratulate you as being a teacher, a person that could help the world learn how to be healthy, happy, and live longer and enjoy it. And you're a good example. So thank you very much, Cristian.
I thank you very much for your kind words, and I'm sure our viewers will be enchanted to meet you again next year for a new interview. And thank you very much. În minutele rămase vă propun să vedem câteva materiale video produse de Bruce Lipton, a căror difuzare se face cu acordul său. Prima secvență se referă la comportamentul celular. Ce știm și ce nu știm despre comportamentul celular. Vizionați următorul material și veți înțelege imediat despre ce este vorba.
Asks a question about the cell membrane. He says that because in my biology of belief book I talk about the cell membrane as the brain, he was also interested in what does the cell membrane use to protect itself as well, so that it's not just a mechanism designed for neurological activity of the cell, but it's also the equivalent of a skin. So the cell membrane has both a skin's protective function and a nervous system's control function. The question is, well, how does it protect itself? Well, number one, on the surface of our cells, there's a forest, a miniature forest of polysaccharides, sugars. And so if you were very, very small and could walk on the surface of your cell, it'd be like walking through a forest of sugar trees. And the sugar trees actually have electrical charges attached to them, mainly negative charges on these sugars, which repels positive particles and keeps them from getting to the surface. So one aspect of protection is just the charge of the surface that prevents molecules from coming in close proximity to the cell membrane. But there are other ways the cell protects itself. There are receptors that recognize things in the environment that are toxic or threatening, and these receptors can bind and negate the influence of these environmental problems. So that's another way of protection. And so basically we can say that the sugars on the surface, which is actually that layer is called the glycocalyx. Glyco is sugar, calyx is coat. On the surface of every cell is a sugar coat, which acts as an insulator and a filter that protects the surface of the cell from being bombarded by stuff from the outside. There's actually a layer of water around those trees, and the significance about that layer of water is that it's called the unstirred layer. What it means is it's like a moat. And that water on the surface of the cell is the mode between the outside environment and the inside environment, and acts again to repel or keep out particles from the environment from affecting the cell membrane. Simple conclusion. The cell membrane is both a neurological mechanism for controlling cell functions, but simultaneously it's the equivalent of a skin that controls what goes in and out of the cell and what protects it from things from the outside, and the nature of keeping a very secure interface so the cell can deal with the external environment. Carl also asks, is it possible that environmental chemicals and signals could fool the cell by mimicking natural things? And the answer is that's absolutely true. In fact, many viruses that enter our cell enter the cell because they actually have a camouflage on them, a molecular camouflage that the cell doesn't recognize as being foreign, and then will actually take that virus and pull it in. Significance, of course, is that cells get infected by the viruses, that influences their function and ultimately shuts down the cells, hopefully before releasing new viruses into the environment. But over time, cells can learn how to protect themselves. Cells have engaged in them their own immune system. It's a system called ubiquitin. And ubiquitin is a molecule that marks other molecules that don't belong in the system and marks these molecules that the cell will remove and destroy them. The question is then, can cells protect themselves from molecules that mimic natural things and then come into the system? The answer is yes and no. It can allow viruses to come in and cause the cell to be destroyed. But it also can learn. The cell has a capability of learning. And the significance of that learning is that it can pass on the learning to subsequent cells that are derived from its own cell division. Cells can learn information about the environment, change the proteins that are in the cell to act as better protection mechanisms on the outer surface of the cell. So, a whole variety of different aspects of protection are included along with the neurological function of a cell membrane. It's very important to understand that, again, the cell membrane is the equivalent of a skin in a human. And so the functions of the skin are being carried out by the cell membrane. And also, if you understand the nature of embryology, the nervous system is derived from the skin that forms the back skin of the embryo. That's where the nervous system comes from. So a human has a nervous system and a protection mechanism derived from the skin as well as a cell. And they function pretty much in the same way.
Următoarea secvență pe care vă propun spre vizionare se referă la o comparație sugestivă a fiziologiei corpului uman și un automobil. De ce? Deoarece prea mult și prea des noi lăsăm funcționarea corpului și a minții pe poziția de pilot automat, mai ales în situațiile în care ar fi absolut nevoie să nu facem aceasta.
When I was young, I wasn't much of an athlete, so I think I got more of my macho by my cars. I had a whole variety, a bunch of hot cars, real fast racing cars. I had once a 405 horsepower Ford with 3 two-barrel carburetors, you know, oh man, that was fast. I had a whole series of Pontiacs, you know, the GTOs and the Firebirds, and I ended up with a car called a Partea, which is a Ford engine, a big Ford V8 engine in an Italian body, so it looked like a Maserati. So I went through the whole range, and my love with cars maybe brought me into the realm of biology for some simple reason, and that is because when I was in biology, I started to recognize the way we perceived a biology is that the body was a vehicle like a car. So when I became a biology student, I started to see how science started to relate the human body to a vehicle, so that we would compare a body like a car, and that we treat health in the same way that you treat a car going to a repair person, so that we train doctors to be more or less auto repair people, except this being the auto. Well, the interesting story about this biology from that perception that we're just a vehicle is then when you look at the biology, it's just chemistry and genes, and when something is wrong, the parts are not working right, you can exchange a heart and get another heart and put it in there, put a kidney in, take a kidney out. You can do all these different kinds of things with medicine and fix it up and fix the body if it gets broken and all these kinds of, just treating it like a vehicle. The only problem with that is that we try to figure out how things work and we have no idea. So medicine, very interestingly enough, knows how to deal with a car or vehicle body by parts replacing it, but really has a lack of understanding of how the parts actually work. And this is why we have the biggest problem in healthcare, because medicine can deal with trauma, but not with disease entities such as cancer and diabetes and Alzheimer's and arthritis and multiple sclerosis. And we start to go on and on. We start to recognize they can identify them, but they just don't know how it works. So what this really means is, in our conventional understanding of perceiving the body as a vehicle, we've left something out. And you know what that is? We left out that there's a driver. The relevance of understanding that there's a driver in the human body, so we can look at the body as a vehicle. Yes, it actually works very well that way, but we have to recognize that the mind and our consciousness represents a driver. And I say, why is that important? For example, let's say two identical cars come off the assembly line, perfectly mechanically identical cars. And I give one to some 16-year-old hothead teenager, and I give one to some, let's say, more mature individual. And I say, okay, both of your vehicles go out on the road. And I'm going to say, well, do you think both vehicles are going to be maintained exactly the same, or going to be as healthy, or going to have the same lifespan? And it turns out absolutely not. Because the hothead will probably, accelerate and hit the brakes and do all that stuff and take a good vehicle and really put a lot of stress on it and cause a lot of damage. The other person, of course, can keep the vehicle for years and years and keep it just like brand new. The relevance in our biology story is this, is that the mind is actually the driver of the vehicle. I have a body. It's like a car. I've got all the parts in here, lungs and heart and digestive system. And I got all these parts. And the fact is, if I have good driver education to use these parts so they work in harmony and health and take care of it and maintain the parts, then my vehicle can last a long time. And yet today's medicine, not counting a driver, says when a vehicle is broken, immediately says there's something wrong with your vehicle. So basically, let's say you drive with 1 foot on the gas and 1 foot on the brake. At some point, you're going to have to keep replacing the brakes. So every time you go to your mechanic say, oh my God, diagnosis, you have some bad brakes. Let me write you a prescription for new brakes. And after about the third or fourth time you keep coming in for new brakes, then we say, well, you have chronic brake failure. Well, now we're going to give you a prescription for brakes for the rest of your life. You're going to need this. And the fact is, but if he sees as you're driving away, you're driving with 1 foot on the gas and 1 foot on the brake, you say, oh, if I just teach him how to drive by taking the foot off the brake, then we'll have no problem again. And it's the same thing in the medical profession. It says you came in with heart disease, take these drugs. And the question is, yeah, but if you're driving your vehicle by eating lousy food and not exercising and being under a lot of stress, this is you, the driver, causing the damage. Giving your vehicle more pills isn't going to fix the problem. It's driver education. So the new biology says, yes, you are a vehicle and we understand it. But the fate of your vehicle is not so much imparted in the mechanics of the vehicle. Less than 5% of the vehicles arrive here, biology-wise, with defects in them. 95% of the vehicles got here in good shape. If we could just get the drivers to recognize the consciousness, the mind, how to take care of this vehicle and how to operate it outside of stress, we can all live healthy and happy lives. So it's time for medicine to expand that from just looking at the physical body and start to recognize the driver is really what controls the fate of this vehicle.
Lipton este de fiecare dată captivant și fascinant prin modul didactic de prezentare a informațiilor. Cel mai important e faptul că el comunică pentru toți cei care nu suntem specialiști în biologie și găsește cele mai sugestive comparații, metafore, exemple și ilustrații. Sper că aceste două ediții inedite Știință și Cunoaștere să vă îndrepte pașii spre o și mai bună aprofundare, iar cei interesați, inclusiv pacienții, să continue să caute răspunsuri la noile întrebări pe care și le pun. Reiterez din nou faptul că această emisiune nu conține sfaturi medicale și nu poate fi folosită pentru diagnoza sau tratamentul unor afecțiuni. Considerăm că este necesar să fie consultați experți în domeniu care pot oferi sfaturile necesare. Producătorul și colaboratorii nu își asumă responsabilitatea aplicării practice a ideilor prezentate de către persoane neavizate sau insuficient pregătite care vizionează această emisiune. Emisiunea Știință și Cunoaștere prezintă informații generale pentru înțelegerea cât mai completă a stării de sănătate și ridicarea nivelului de calitate a vieții. Materialele și sfaturile furnizate trebuie apreciate ca simple informații și nu ca analize și sfaturi medicale. Îmi place uneori să închei pe marginea unor aforisme despre știință și cunoaștere pe care le-am mai repetat și cu alte ocazii, și anume: știința este procesul folosit pentru a căuta adevărul și nu este o colecție de adevăruri. De fapt, cel mai bine știința ar putea fi definită ca o cunoaștere aranjată și clasificată în conformitate cu adevărul, faptele și legile generale ale naturii. Cunoașterea a fost, este și va fi întotdeauna o aventură nesfârșită la marginea incertitudinii. Fiți alături de noi data viitoare la o nouă întâlnire cu Știință și Cunoaștere.